my name is Aditya, and I've just last month graduated from RSM full-time MBA program. Why primarily RSM? It's a school which focuses a lot on sustainability. RSM MBA is cheaper as well, so better ROI, and it also helps you position yourself beautifully in the Netherlands, which.
Hi Aditya, welcome to Croissant Corner, powered by Masters Admin. Thank you so much for taking time out and agreeing to share your experience at Rotterdam School of Management.
Yeah, thank you, Prav. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. So usually we don't, generally talk a lot in the beginning because I think it's a pretty intensive conversation which we usually have on our podcast. So we're going to jump straight into the questions, but as a ritual, we always want a brief round of introduction from our guest. So if you can just briefly introduce yourself and also share with our listeners what is it that you were doing before you pursued your MBA?
All right. So, my name is Aditya, and I've just last month graduated from RSM full-time MBA program.
Sure.
And I'm an Indian, so I've worked for around 6.5 years in India before coming to do my MBA in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Again, so I'm an engineer, electrical and electronics to be precise, and I worked in the rail industry for the last 6 years before coming to the MBA.
Mhm.
And again, started more on the shop floor in the manufacturing side, getting my hands dirty, and then moving on to different roles. Again, majority of them under the umbrella of project management.
Sure.
Also done a little bit of bid management, developing techno-commercial proposals, managing stakeholders, clients, and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, after 6 years, I kind of decided, okay, let me just go out and explore other industries, other functions, other verticals, and especially, the field of sustainability, which is kind of gaining a lot of traction, especially in the Europe right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's primarily why then I decided to come to RSM to the Netherlands to dip my toes into that.
Great. And what was, if I may know, what was your triggering point to sort of decide, okay, I want to do an MBA? That is one. And second, why did you choose, let's say, RSM or European MBA over, let's say, something in US or some other B school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was no one triggering point as such. I mean, I always had like, this option of doing an MBA in mind. So since I started working, I had my mind set on that because I always used to enjoy delving into the strategy side of things at the macro level, right? Whether it be macroeconomics or geopolitics
Yeah.
or strategy at a company or a corporate level.
True.
So even when I was working for my previous employer, I always had that macro level, look out for what's happening, and that's where my interest lies.
Hmm.
So I eventually then, the thought process behind that was to kind of stay in the company, gain some leadership experience, some, cross-functional working experience, maybe international exposure as well, and then in the long term go for an MBA. So that was always there.
Sure.
Uh, why I decided to do it when I decided to do it, that was because I primarily thought that majority of the things that I could learn in my previous industry and in my previous job,
Yeah.
I had learned those.
Hmm.
And I found it to be the right time to, take the next step. Why primarily RSM? So it's a concoction of a lot of reasons, primarily because it's a school which focuses a lot on sustainability, especially the RSM's curriculum has a lot of elements which
Mm-hmm.
help us understand a lot more on what's happening in the sustainability space and what would happen in the long term in this space. So
Sure.
that was the primary reason. Apart from that, I also liked a few more elements of RSM's curriculum, which were very different from, the curriculums that were being offered by other business schools in
Right.
Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and again, I mean, RSM MBA is cheaper as well, so better ROI, and it also helps you position yourself beautifully in the Netherlands, which again is less averse to non-Dutch speakers in the job market
Yeah.
and in general as well, like the culture, the vibe of the country, and vibe of Rotterdam is also really nice. So all
True.
these reasons kind of propelled me to apply for RSM.
Yeah, I think correctly pointed out, there are two major aspects with a lot of students when they're trying to figure out their MBA in Europe trying to miss out on. One is ROI, and that's something which is
Mm.
important, especially let's say with a person who has, I would say, 6, 7 years of work ex, or let's say 10 years of work ex. ROI is something which always should be considered, whether you're doing a 2-year course or a 1-year course and which country. And second, you correctly mentioned Netherlands being a melting pot of all cultures, of all nationalities. Yes, there is, I mean, they're not very hard on Dutch speakers, or there are enough job opportunities as well. So yeah, that perfectly makes sense.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. In fact, but still, I'd like to point something again. In the last 1 year or so, I've also kind of realized if I could touch a bit more on the job market in the Netherlands, it's not like all the industries are open to non-Dutch speakers. There are
Sure.
certain industries, even in the Netherlands, who still emphasize on having like a good proficiency of Dutch, like the consulting industry or the marketing, because primarily these industries, the companies in these industries have to liaise with majority public clients again. So that
True.
was kind of a surprise. I mean, I did a little bit of a research before coming in here, but yeah, as I started exploring the job market, talking to different companies and in the different industries, I kind of understood that, yeah, I mean, for a few industries, Dutch is
True.
still pretty much the standard here.
Yeah, and I think it's applicable across Europe. I mean, even in France or let's say Germany, the kind of understanding I've had, you're correct. It's very specific to industry and also specific to roles, right? The moment it's, let's say, a business development strategy or a sales role,
Hmm.
or let's say a consulting role where you have to handle local clients, then
Yeah,
you have to be native fluent. This is something which we tend to miss out on when you're not in the European Union. But if you're looking for roles which are more technical in nature, I think yes, there is still an opportunity, and those roles are not that heavy on language requirement,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Uh,
the case.
so in terms of your application, so RSM sort of is different versus rest of the schools, right? Because it's a January intake, whereas rest of most of the B schools are September intake, right?
Yeah.
So how did you start with your preparation? How did you go about your GMAT preparation, your application, your essay? How was it? When did you start preparing for it? If you can just take us through that journey.
Yeah, so I mean, if you've gone through RSM's application, it's not that heavy in terms of the number of essays and everything that you have to write. So I don't know how it is now, but a couple of years back, it was just one essay that you had to write where you had to mention about what you've done in the past, which has created some impact, or how you would like to be a force for positive change in the future.
Sure.
And that is something RSM emphasizes a lot on. And that is something I mean, the propensity or an aspiration to make a positive change in the society is something which I've seen, which is very common in the cohort that I was in as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of emphasis on that. However, circling back to your question, so I started. So again, I actually started preparing for GMAT quite early. Again, it was in somewhere in the middle of 2021.
Okay.
And after that, once the GMAT was done, then I started focusing on shortlisting of schools. And I think it's a very confusing phase to kind of decide the kind of schools that you should target based on your profile as well as aspirations, and how you strike a very good balance of what are ambitious and what are safe schools, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that's where your venture also definitely help a lot of students out there. But yeah, so and then I kind of started applying. I think I applied for RSM in second round, which was around February or March of 2022. And then I think after you get shortlisted, you have to give a Kira interview as well. And then there's one interview with the admissions team, and then you get the admit if everything goes well.
Sure. Sure.
So that's how that is about. And I also think the scholarship decision is also given along with your admit, so you don't
Hmm.
have to specifically apply or submit an application for scholarship.
Okay.
At least that is how it was a couple of years ago. I'm
Yeah.
not very sure on how it is now. I think I've been in contact with a few prospect RSM students as well, and the sense that I've got is that there have been a few changes in this year.
Okay.
So I'd suggest all the prospect students who are looking at this podcast as well to maybe once clarify it with
Sure.
the admissions committee on these two aspects. One is application for scholarship, and I think there have been changes in the GMAT requirement as well for
Mhm.
RSM. Yeah.
Okay. 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 And is there anything specific which you feel probably stood out in your application? Could be in terms of your experience or your essay or your interviews, something which sort of you think differentiated you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by how smooth the RSM admission process was.
Okay.
And I mean, I still remember my RSM interview. It was very different in a sense that, the interviewer was there to really understand who I was and what was my journey and what I wanted to do.
Right.
So it was a 45-minute it was more of a conversation, and it was a very pleasant experience, wherein I felt heard, and I felt understood, and I felt comfortable to open up and explain, whatever I felt like explaining at that
Sure.
point of time. So that experience was very nice and was very different from, other interview experiences that I was giving at that point of time,
Mhm.
in this MBA admission space.
Right. And what's the MBA program like? What's the class structure? What's the batch size? How many international students do you have? If you can
Yeah.
just hint a little bit about that. And also, if you can share, uh, is there anything specific about RSM MBA, or let's say a specialization which the program is known for, so that any aspirant who's applying for RSM knows that, okay, if I'm going to, let's say, an MBA in finance, probably it's in Galen, or if it's marketing, it's some other school. So what does RSM, in your perspective, does it stand for?
Yeah. So again, I'll start with the first question. So RSM's cohort is at around always around 100 students, 100 to 120 students. So it's relatively smaller cohort sizes compared to the other European MBAs. And generally you are divided into two or three sections. So for us, there were 100 students in a cohort and two sections, and the sections used to be shuffled every module. So there are five
Sure.
modules which
Hmm.
are spread across 1 year of MBA.
Okay.
I think there were around 35 nationalities in our cohort, so it was super diverse, not only in terms of nationality, but also in terms of the thought process or experiences that people brought onto the discussion table.
Yeah.
Um, so that was your first question, and the second was what was the second question?
The
I
second question
don't.
was more around in terms of the MBA program, the curriculum. Is
Hmm.
there anything specific which the
Yeah,
curriculum
yeah,
talks
yeah,
about? Probably
yeah,
marketing, finance, sustainability, for example, you mentioned, I understand, but is
yeah.
there anything else the curriculum focuses on?
Yeah, so generally how it works is that for the first four modules, three and a half modules, you learn all the core subjects,
Sure.
and then you can decide on whether you want to do a specialization based on the electives that you take, or you can do a general MBA as well.
Right.
However, a couple of areas where I found RSM MBA to be really good was, again, number one, on sustainability,
Sure.
especially sustainability courses that the MBA offers, and the professors as well. So that was one.
Hmm.
I also really enjoyed the marketing course for an MBA,
Hmm.
primarily because of the quality of professors who were actually taking that course. And in particular, I really enjoyed the class discussions for marketing. Um, and yeah, but where RSM MBA stood out for me was non-core MBA subjects.
Okay.
So there's a thing called personal leadership development,
Right.
and it's a course which is conducted throughout the 12-month MBA,
Sure.
and it focuses a lot on self-awareness. It focuses a lot on helping us develop a lot more of emotional maturity,
Yeah.
and that is something which I personally really enjoyed. I mean, someone who's been into meditation and cultivating mindfulness for a long time, I really enjoyed that course. Along with that, there are a few more elements which are very unique to RSM's MBA. So
Hmm.
one of that is a living management project, LMP, wherein a group of 4 or 5 students have to actually work on a consulting project for a real employer out there.
Okay.
So that in itself is also very good in
Sure.
terms of.
Yeah.
So how it works is that for the first 6 to 8 months, RSM MBA helps you ingrain a lot of business essentials and self-awareness,
Yeah.
and then it in a structured way, and then it kind of places you in open waters where everything's unstructured. Obviously, there's a lot of coaching there, So for LMP, how it works is that you liaise with an employer and you have a problem statement and you work for 4 to 5 weeks on that particular problem statement.
Yep.
You have a consulting coach as well available from the college,
Hmm.
and I feel he does a great job. I mean, the guy is amazing in terms of helping us understand how to approach problem solving and then presentation stuff like that. But
True.
what I also really liked was that RSM also gives us a lot of access to psychologist coaches, which help us also navigate our um, own which helps us actually understand well what we are doing in that process,
True.
and help us reflect a lot more on, and help us become better at how we are contributing to that particular project, but also how we can grow as a professional as well.
Sure. Sure.
So again, there are a few more elements,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, LMP
Yeah.
is one thing that stood out for me. uh, yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, I think it's always good to have a practical application of what you've been learning, right? And
Yeah.
I completely resonate with you because we also had a pretty much similar structure, working on a live consulting project, and that sort of brings your entire MBA program together. While
Yeah.
let's say in our jobs we were doing it, but once you go back to academia and you get your fundamentals correct, and then when you implement, I think it's a completely different ball game altogether. And
Yeah.
second point, when you mentioned that there was a lot of psychological support, I think it is required, because most of us, rather, I would say everyone in an MBA program is away from home. There's no
Yeah.
family in a city of all strangers. You don't speak the language. So
Yeah.
that is one challenge. And at the same time, yes, you are here to build your career. So there's so much happening within your mind. It's always good to have a good support system. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's always good. In terms of the career support, is there any career services or career center at RSM which sort of helps you, guides you throughout the year, and how does that happen?
Yeah. So there is a career center, and again, there are different coaches. And I mean, I think 8 to 10 students are assigned to a particular career coach throughout the year, starting from the first day onwards.
Sure.
And so yeah, career center actually extends a lot of support in helping us first develop our, job search strategy, and then focus a lot more on how do we develop good LinkedIn,
Yeah.
our LinkedIn profile, how do we develop our good resumes, cover letters, how do we do networking. So that's one aspect. But then there's another course that RSM's MBA offers. It's called Career Center course. So
Okay.
again, it has different names in different modules.
Sure.
And in that course, there's this guy called Nicholas. I think he's quite famous across different business schools in Europe. So he helps us to acquire a lot of these skills which are really essential for us to go out and network and get the jobs, get the referrals, and then
Yeah.
how do we give our interviews or how do we tell our stories. So
True.
that particular course is also offered by Career Center. And that I found that course to be really beneficial, especially for people like me who are coming out of India, straight out of engineering college, where we are not at all accustomed to going out and networking to get a
For sure.
job.
Yeah.
Primarily, it's just on campus placements, right? So I found that course to be really really helpful, and that actually I could see a lot of difference in how I approach the job search now versus how I used to approach it maybe at the starting of last year.
True, true, true. No, I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of networking. It's a completely different ballgame
Yeah.
in India and versus Europe. Of course, we do network in India, but not that aggressively, or let's say not that frequently.
Yeah.
But it's for anyone who's aspiring to do an MBA from Europe or even let's say US. They should be prepared, or let's say sort of push themselves from that uncomfortable zone of not networking to just going out and networking with people, because that's how the world operates in this part of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great. Just one last question before we wrap this up. Any specific tip you would want to give, any specific advice you would want to give to someone who is applying for RSM right now? Uh, any,
Yeah.
yeah,
So again, I mean, the tips would probably be very generic, like have your story right, introspect a lot,
Sure.
And be very organic and authentic in your applications, right? And maybe do a bit more of research on the MBA, talk
Sure.
to a few alumni or current students, and yeah, first of all, just understand and kind of decide what you want to do post the MBA,
Hmm.
right? And then kind of decide whether RSM takes you there or not. So that's, I think, the most essential part. You decide where you want to reach and then decide how you want to go there.
Yeah.
And that's something which I also suggest to a lot of people who reach out to me, with queries relating to RSM. So again, it's like, first decide what do you want to do, and then decide whether RSM will take you there, or if there's some other school which is more, um, will equip you better to reach there. And if you decide then it's RSM, do a bit more of research, talk to people, introspect, see how you can have a good story around being a positive change,
Yeah.
force for positive change in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be pretty much it.
Oh, you pointed out correctly, because this is something which we come across quite frequently,
Hmm.
where people usually go by rankings without realizing what they want to do post MBA, right? So probably I want to go for an HEC or an INSEAD, but my professional goals possibly don't align with whatever's being offered by the school. Could be by a school which is ranked 10. And also in
Yeah.
terms of ROI, I mean, there's so many multiple factors. So yeah, I think it's a very strong recommendation to whoever is considering MBA from Europe or even from US. It's always better to plan what you want to do post MBA. Even if you don't have 100% clarity, even 50% would do it. But just have a line of sight as to what is it that you're looking for post MBA, because that sort of sets the base for you in terms of how will you approach a business school. Thank you so much, Aditya. This was really interesting. I think a lot of interesting points and a lot of points which usually get missed. But thank you so much for bringing those out. And I'm pretty sure whoever is considering an MBA in Europe or US will pay attention to it, because these are not the points which you generally come across. Because all of us have a very traditional approach, and we also have learned it by doing. So it's
Yeah.
good to have these points already in their playbook. But great, thank you so much for your all the insights, and wish you all the best.
You're most welcome, Prof. Good luck to you too.